My fiancé ran off with my sister before the ceremony, so I walked away and gave them a letter that left them speechless and shattered. Alright, here's my story about my wedding that never happened. Trust me, it's the kind of thing you read about online and think, nah, that couldn't actually happen, but it did to me, and honestly, I still can't believe it. So, let's rewind a bit. I've been with James since we were teenagers, high school sweethearts, college sweethearts, you name it. He was my first serious relationship, and for years, we were like that couple everyone envied, or so I thought. We got engaged at 22, with a wedding planned by 24. I thought I knew him inside and out. We talked about everything, future plans, travel dreams, even baby names. It felt like my life was perfectly mapped out, and James was right there in every part of it. But here's where things get a little strange. James and my younger sister, Tasha, had always been close. They joked around a lot, texted each other, shared memes, all that. They'd even hang out alone sometimes, which I thought was nice. You know, I figured it's great when family and partners get along, better that than the horror stories you hear about in-laws who hate each other. So, I never questioned their friendship. I wanted to be the cool fiancé, the one who's laid back and totally unbothered. There were a few times when things felt a bit weird, though. Tasha's ex-boyfriends, for example, were all super jealous of James. They'd complain to her about how close she was with my fiancé, and at the time, I thought they were just insecure. I brushed it off as their problem, not mine. I trusted James completely. But sometimes, I'd notice little things, like how James would look at Tasha or how he'd lean in close when they talked. Nothing huge, just small stuff that made me wonder. But I'd always tell myself, nah, you're just being paranoid. They're family now, and I let it go. Fast forward to the big day, wedding day, the day that was supposed to be the start of my new life, the day where everything would finally come together. I was in my dress, makeup done, hair all set, the works. I had spent months planning this day down to the tiniest detail, from the flowers to the playlist for the reception. My friends and family were buzzing around, helping me get ready, and I was in that nervous but excited state. You know, like the butterflies were real. As the time got closer, I started getting a little anxious because I hadn't heard from James all morning, not even a hey, can't wait to see you. But I thought, it's fine. He's probably just as nervous as I am. Maybe he's running around doing last-minute stuff. I wanted everything to be perfect, so I brushed it off and kept getting ready. Finally, the time came. I was supposed to be heading down the aisle in 10 minutes, and there I was, standing in the back room of the venue with my dad, waiting for James. I had my phone in hand, just in case he texted or something. My dad was chatting away, but I was barely listening, just staring at the door, waiting to see James walk in with that grin he always had. But then 10 minutes turned into 15, then 20. At 25 minutes, my stomach started doing flips. The coordinator came over, asking if we should delay the ceremony. I started to panic a little. I asked if someone could check on James, but they said no one could find him. That's when things got weird. I pulled out my phone and tried calling him, straight to voicemail. Okay, maybe his phone died or something. I tried again, same thing. Then I went to message him on social media, and that's when I saw it, he had blocked me on everything. My heart dropped. I remember just standing there, phone in my hand, not really processing what was happening. Like, how does your fiancé block you on your wedding day? I went from confused to angry to just straight up terrified in seconds. I mean, this was James, my James, the guy I'd planned my life with. What was going on? I must have called him a dozen times, hoping maybe it was some awful mistake or a sick prank, but no, nothing, just silence. My mom came over, all worried, asking what was wrong, and I couldn't even explain it to her. How do you tell your mom that your fiancé has ghosted you on your wedding day? Finally, my cousin Alan pulled me aside. He looked at me with this pity in his eyes, like he knew something terrible. That's when he told me he'd overheard some guests talking. Apparently, someone saw James leave the venue early that morning with Tasha. They were seen getting into his car together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I couldn't believe it, my own sister. I kept thinking, there's no way, not Tasha. She'd never do that to me. But the pieces started to click, the little looks, the private jokes, the way she'd always been right there, just a little too close. I felt sick, like physically sick. The room was spinning, and it was everything I could do not to completely lose it in front of everyone. I stumbled out of that back room, half walking, half running. I just needed air, needed to be away from everyone. I didn't want to believe what I'd just heard. Part of me thought maybe it was all a misunderstanding, that maybe they'd come back and everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew. James and Tasha had planned this. They'd left me here, dressed up and waiting, surrounded by friends and family, all to run off together. I must have sat outside for hours, just staring at my phone, hoping for some miracle text, some explanation. But there was nothing, just silence. I watched as guests trickled out, giving me those looks of pity, those awkward hugs, and I'm so sorry glances. My mom kept coming by, asking if I wanted to talk, but I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? My fiancé and my sister just ran off together, but hey, no big deal. Eventually, I was the last one left at the venue, just me, in my wedding dress, alone. I don't even remember getting home. I must have been on autopilot, just going through the motions. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my dress, feeling completely hollow. It was like everything I'd believed in, everything I'd planned, had just vanished in one brutal, humiliating instant. And that was it. No wedding, no fiancé, no sister, just me, left to pick up the pieces. After the disaster that was my wedding day, you'd think I'd hit rock bottom and just start to bounce back up, right? Like, there's nowhere lower to go after being left alone in a dress in front of everyone I know. But no, it turns out there was a whole new level of low waiting for me. After that day, in the beginning, I was just numb. Like, I can't even describe how detached from reality I felt. My phone kept lighting up with texts and calls from people wanting to know what happened or offering their sympathy, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I put it on silent and threw it somewhere, trying to ignore that any of this was actually real. I didn't even want to leave my room, didn't want to talk to anyone. My family, friends, everyone was reaching out, but what could they say that would actually make any of this better? Then the shock started to fade, and that's when it hit me. I was angry. Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. My mind was a constant loop of questions. Why? How could they do this to me? And what did I do wrong? I was losing sleep, replaying every single memory, analyzing every small interaction I'd had with James and Tasha, trying to figure out if there was something I'd missed, some sign I could have caught earlier. It was torture, but my brain wouldn't let me let it go. I guess I needed to find some explanation, anything that would help me make sense of it all. Then I started doing the one thing everyone told me not to do, stalking their social media. Yeah, I know, bad move, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know what they were up to, if they were flaunting their relationship or if they'd just gone off-grid. Tasha had blocked me, so I used a friend's account to look her up. There wasn't anything on her page, no posts, no photos with James, nothing. It was like she'd wiped her entire online existence clean. That somehow made it worse because now it felt like they were hiding something, and I was left in the dark with nothing but my assumptions. Eventually, I hit this weird stage where I wasn't just angry, I was embarrassed. I kept replaying that wedding day, remembering how I'd sat there waiting like an idiot, not even realizing what was going on. I couldn't shake the humiliation of it all. People had flown in, gotten dressed up, and spent their time and money to be there, and for what? For me to get humiliated in front of everyone. At some point, I knew I needed help. I was barely eating, wasn't sleeping, and I felt like a shadow of myself. A friend suggested therapy, and at first, I kind of laughed it off. I didn't think talking to someone would make a difference, it wasn't going to magically bring back my old life. But she convinced me to try one session, just to get things off my chest. That first session, I didn't even know where to begin. I sat there for a good 10 minutes, just staring at the wall, trying to figure out how to explain this mess. When I finally opened up, it all started pouring out, the betrayal, the anger, the humiliation, everything. And for the first time, someone listened without pity, without judgment, just listened. I can't say it fixed me, but it felt like I was unloading some of the weight I'd been carrying. Little by little, I started finding small ways to rebuild myself. I got back into things I'd put on hold during the whole wedding planning circus, joined a book club, went to a few local meetups, tried to reconnect with friends I'd sort of let fall to the wayside. I even started jogging in the mornings, just to clear my head and start each day with a fresh mindset. But healing wasn't some linear thing where I kept feeling better every day. Some days, I'd feel okay, almost normal, and other days, the reality of it all would just hit me like a truck. I'd think about how I was supposed to be a wife by now, maybe even planning for a family, and then I'd remember how I'd lost not only James but also my sister. Like, how do you even grieve that, losing your fiancé and your sister in one move? And then there were the people around me. Some of my relatives tried to be supportive, but they didn't really get it. They'd say things like, "You're better off without him, or you'll find someone else." I know they were trying to help, but that just wasn't what I needed to hear. I needed to understand why they did this, not get pep talked into moving on like it was a bad breakup or something. This wasn't just losing a boyfriend, this was my entire future and my trust in two people I thought I could rely on. Through all of this, My cousin Alan was a huge support. He's the one who told me about James and Tasha leaving the venue, and he didn't try to sugarcoat anything after that. He'd let me vent, sit there with me when I was having a bad day, and even pushed me to go out and do something fun when I felt like locking myself in my room. He's a quiet guy, not big on the whole talk about your feelings thing, but he just kind of knew when I needed someone. I owe him a lot for that. Over time, I stopped checking their social media. I stopped wondering if they were happy together, if they were still together. I figured it was only hurting me, and they didn't deserve to live rent-free in my head anymore. After a few months, I moved into a new place, new apartment, new neighborhood, just a fresh start where I didn't have to be reminded of all the plans I'd made with James. Moving on wasn't easy, but I felt like I was finally getting somewhere, and I didn't need him or anyone else to get there. I won't lie, part of me still felt like I'd lost something huge. I'd lost my sense of trust in people. I questioned everyone's intentions, even close friends, wondering if they'd betray me too. It's hard to shake that kind of paranoia, and I'm still working on it. But I was learning to be okay on my own. I was building a life that didn't include either of them, and for the first time, that didn't feel like a tragedy. It felt freeing in a way. By the end of that year, I had my own little routine, my own place, and my own life. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have, but it was mine. I'd found a kind of peace in that, a weird acceptance that things don't always go the way you expect, but sometimes that's okay. Looking back, I'm proud of how far I came. That whole mess broke me down to nothing, but I didn't stay there. I built myself back up, piece by piece, until I didn't even recognize the person I'd been before. And maybe that's for the best. Months after I'd finally gotten some kind of peace back, I was almost in this routine where I didn't think about James or Tasha every day. I was working, seeing friends, going to the gym, even dating here and there. Life was moving forward, slowly but surely. So, naturally, it all had to be interrupted, and of course, it was by none other than James. One random Tuesday night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was probably just another spam call, but something in me was curious. I picked up. "Hello?" I said, half distracted. There was a pause, and then I heard it, James's voice on the other end. "Hey, it's me." For a second, I thought it was a sick joke. My brain struggled to register that I was actually hearing his voice after all these months. This was the guy who'd left me alone in a wedding dress, the guy who'd run off with my sister, and here he was, acting like it was just some normal catch-up call. My stomach did a flip, and all that anger and hurt I'd pushed down just started bubbling up. "What do you want, James?" I kept my voice cold, trying not to let him hear how his call was getting to me. He sounded different, his voice was rough, like he'd been crying or maybe just hadn't slept in days. I just wanted to talk. I know this is weird, but I need you to hear me out." My first instinct was to hang up right there. I didn't owe him anything. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I figured, what's the worst that could happen by just hearing him out? So, I stayed silent, waiting for him to spill whatever he had to say. "I'm sorry," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "I know that doesn't even begin to cover it, but I needed to say it. I've been a mess, trying to figure out how I ended up here, and I finally read all those messages you sent me on our wedding day." At that, I almost laughed. It took him this long to read the texts I'd sent in pure desperation, trying to stop him from running off with my sister. The texts where I told him everything I'd heard about Tasha's lies, her ex, the pregnancy rumors, all of it. He hadn't even bothered to read them until now. "What do you expect me to say, James? You ran off with my sister on the day we were supposed to get married, and now you want to talk?" My voice was shaking, and I hated that he still had this effect on me. I know how it sounds, but I was wrong about everything. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I've spent months realizing how big of a mistake I made, and I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. There was this long silence where I didn't know what to say. He sounded genuinely regretful, but what did that change? My life had been ripped apart, and his sorry wasn't going to fix any of that. Part of me wanted to scream at him, but I was just too drained, so I let him talk. He started rambling about Tasha, saying that things hadn't exactly been the fairy tale he thought they would be. Apparently, she'd turned into someone he barely recognized, always out with her friends, blowing through his money, and treating him more like a piggy bank than a partner. I could hear the regret in his voice, and yeah, maybe it felt a little like justice, but it didn't erase what he'd done to me. "You made your bed, James," I finally said, cutting him off. "You and Tasha both. You hurt me in a way I didn't even know was possible, and now, just because you're unhappy, you want sympathy? No, I don't expect you to feel sorry for me. I miss you," he said, his voice breaking a bit. That was it for me. I almost laughed again, but this time it was more out of frustration than anything. You miss me? Are you kidding? You threw everything away for my sister, James. Whatever you're feeling right now, it's your problem, not mine. He was quiet for a second, and then he sighed. I know I can't make it right. I just needed you to know that I regret it. I was stupid and blind, and I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. I sat there, phone in hand, not really sure what to say. On one hand, I'd wanted this moment for months, to hear him admit he'd screwed up. But now that I had it, it felt hollow. His regrets didn't make any of the pain go away. They didn't make me feel better or undo the humiliation I'd gone through. Look, James, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I've moved on. My life isn't about you anymore, and I don't want to reopen old wounds. Whatever issues you have with Tasha, they're yours to deal with. I've got my own life now. He didn't argue, didn't push. He just let out this long sigh, like he knew this was the end of it. I understand. I won't bother you again, he mumbled, sounding defeated. And with that, he hung up. I just sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process everything. It felt like closure in a way, but it also stirred up things I thought I'd buried. I hadn't expected to feel so much after that call, but there I was, flooded with memories of all the plans we'd made and all the betrayal he'd left behind. It was like ripping open a wound that had barely healed. But as the days went by, I realized I didn't feel as haunted by it anymore. Hearing him say he was sorry, hearing the regret in his voice, it didn't fix anything, but it helped me let go of any last bits of anger I was still holding on to. I didn't need revenge or payback. I didn't need him to be miserable. I just needed to know that I was done with him for good. After that call, I blocked his number. I wasn't going to let him keep popping back into my life whenever he felt like it. I was finally in a place where I felt like I could breathe again, and he wasn't going to take that away from me. That chapter was closed, locked, and thrown away. Looking back, that call was exactly what I needed, not because I wanted him back or because I wanted his apologies, but because it gave me proof that I'd made the right choice by letting him go. I thought that after James's call, I'd finally have a bit of peace, like that was the final bit of closure I needed. But what I didn't see coming was the storm brewing with my family, because of course, it wasn't enough for James to come out of nowhere, my family had to get involved too. The day after James called, my mom reached out. At first, it was a simple text, "Hey, we haven't talked in a while. How are you?" It felt way too casual, given everything that had gone down. We hadn't exactly been on speaking terms since the wedding disaster. My family tried to stay neutral through it all, but neutral somehow always meant backing Tasha up after everything she'd done. They acted like it was just a misunderstanding, and they expected me to brush it off. So, yeah, I'd kept my distance, but here's the thing, when my mom messaged, I still felt that twinge of hope. I thought maybe she was reaching out to finally acknowledge what I'd been through, to actually take my side for once. So, like an idiot, I replied, and before I knew it, we were setting up a family dinner at my parents' house. I told myself that maybe this was the moment they'd see what I went through. I'd be able to finally get that validation I'd been wanting for so long. I showed up at their place with a mix of nerves and some weird sense of excitement. Walking in, I could feel all those old memories, the ones of happy family dinners, movie nights, holidays, all those times I thought we were a solid family. But as soon as I sat down, I could tell something was off. My parents were too stiff. My mom was making small talk, asking about work and my friends, but there was this edge in her voice that I couldn't ignore. Then, without warning, she brought up James. I felt my stomach drop. She wanted to know why he'd reached out to me and what we talked about. Apparently, she'd heard through some grapevine, probably Tasha, that we'd been in contact. It was weirdly invasive, like she had a right to know all the details of my personal life. "Why does it matter, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. "I haven't been with James in ages. You guys know that," she sighed, giving me that look she used to give me when I'd get a B on a test in school, like I was disappointing her by not doing exactly what she expected. "It just feels like you're stirring up old wounds, you know. You've moved on, Tasha has moved on, and there it was, Tasha. Everything always seemed to come back to her. Tasha had moved on, so naturally, I was expected to do the same, as if I hadn't been the one actually betrayed, as if I was somehow still holding on to this for the drama or something. "I'm not the one who reached out," I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "James called me out of nowhere. I didn't even want to talk to him." My dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but jumping in anyway. "You know, honey, maybe it's time we all just let this go. Tasha's still family, and she's had her own struggles. Can't we all just put this behind us?" That's when I realized they weren't reaching out to make things right. They weren't looking for my side, my perspective. They just wanted me to forgive and forget to make things easier for them. They wanted me to move on so they wouldn't have to keep dealing with this messy, uncomfortable family drama. In their eyes, Tasha could be forgiven for anything, but I was the one holding on to a grudge. Are you serious? I asked, my voice starting to shake. She's still family? I was supposed to marry James. She ran off with my fiancé, left me standing there like an idiot, and you think I'm the one who should just move on like it's nothing? They looked at each other, then back at me, and my mom gave me this sad little smile, like she was dealing with a difficult child. Sweetheart, we know it was hard on you, but Tasha's still our daughter, and she needs support too. I just stared at them, stunned. The message was clear. I was expected to take the high road, to suck it up and be the bigger person. Tasha was the one they were worried about, not me, not what I went through. Tasha, the golden child who could do no wrong in their eyes, even when she'd stabbed me in the back. Something in me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands shaking. I'm done, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. You're asking me to ignore everything she did, to pretend like none of this happened, just because it makes you uncomfortable. Well, guess what? I'm not just moving on because it's convenient for you. My mom tried to say something, but I didn't let her. I grabbed my stuff and walked out, leaving them sitting there, shocked. I'd always been the quiet, compliant one, the one who never made waves, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't be that person anymore. They wanted me to sacrifice my own peace, my own feelings, for the sake of keeping the family together, and I wasn't going to do it. The car ride home was a blur. I was angry, hurt, but mostly just sad that my own parents couldn't see what I'd gone through, that they were so blinded by their need to protect Tasha that they couldn't be there for me. It was like losing them all over again. But at the same time, there was a weird sense of relief, like I'd finally taken a stand for myself, even if it meant burning some bridges. For the next few days, I didn't answer their calls or texts. They left voicemails, sent long messages, but I couldn't bring myself to listen or read any of them. I was exhausted, emotionally drained from years of putting myself last to keep them happy, and I didn't want to keep doing that. Then, a few days later, my cousin Alan reached out. Alan had been my rock since the wedding disaster, the one family member who didn't pressure me to get over it or play nice. He didn't try to lecture me or make excuses for anyone. He just listened. And when I told him about the family dinner, he didn't act surprised. If anything, he looked like he'd been expecting it. They've always had a soft spot for Tasha, he said, shaking his head. But you don't have to put up with it. You've done enough. Hearing that from someone who actually understood where I was coming from felt like a lifeline. He reminded me that it was okay to set boundaries, to protect my own peace. For so long, I'd been caught up in trying to keep everyone else happy, and here he was, giving me permission to finally prioritize myself. And that's when it hit me, I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need them to understand my side, to apologize, or to make it right. I could let go without their approval. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own story. So, yeah, maybe I was facing the past, but this time, it was on my terms. And honestly, that was more healing than any apology they could have given me. When I thought I'd finally gotten some distance from all the drama, my phone buzzed with a message that felt like a punch to the gut. It was from my mom, who'd clearly been holding back until now. The message read, "We've been trying to reach you. It's time to stop avoiding this and come back to your family. Tasha is your sister, and families forgive each other. If you can't let this go and make peace with Tasha, then maybe you're not interested in being part of this family." I stared at my phone, feeling my heart sink. After everything I'd been through, they were now threatening me, pushing me to forgive or face being disowned. It was like all those months I'd spent healing and standing my ground had meant nothing to them. I took a few deep breaths, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Why was it so easy for them to side with Tasha? She was the one who betrayed me, yet they were acting like I was the villain here. I called my cousin Alan, the only family member who'd stayed solidly in my corner. He picked up on the first ring. "They're giving me an ultimatum, Alan," I said, not even bothering with a greeting. There was a silence on the line, then a deep sigh. I had a feeling they'd pull something like this. "They're trying to guilt you into coming back. They don't want to lose their image of a happy family, even if it means completely disregarding what you went through." I felt a lump in my throat, holding back the urge to scream. How can they just act like none of this was a big deal? I mean, I was left at my own wedding. Tasha and James didn't just hurt me, they humiliated me. And they want me to just let it all go because it's easier for them? Alan said, "If you forgive Tasha, then they don't have to deal with the reality of what she did. They get to pretend it was just a mistake and move on. They're doing this for themselves, not for you." Hearing it put so bluntly somehow helped. He was right, My family wasn't asking for my forgiveness because they cared about me, they were doing it because they didn't want to face the consequences of their own failure to hold Tasha accountable. Look, you know what you need to do, Alan continued. You've been making a new life for yourself. You're building something without them. If they can't respect your boundaries, then maybe they don't deserve to be part of that life. It hit me then that I'd been hanging on to the hope that at some point, my parents would take my side, that they'd see what I'd gone through, see how much Tasha had hurt me, and finally stand up for me. But that was just a fantasy. They were never going to change, and staying in their lives was only going to keep me in a place of hurt. I took a deep breath, nodding to myself. You're right, Alan. It's time I let go for real this time. That night, I sat down with a piece of paper and started writing. It felt kind of ridiculous at first, like I was in a movie, but it was the only way I could get everything off my chest. I wrote down everything, how betrayed I'd felt by Tasha and James, how humiliated I'd been on that day, and how hurt I was that they'd taken Tasha's side. I told them that if they couldn't respect my feelings or even acknowledge what I'd been through, then there was nothing left to say. When I finished, I read it over, my hands shaking a little. But as I reread my words, I realized how much I'd been holding in, all the hurt, the anger, the disappointment. It was all there on the page. This was my chance to finally let go, to stop looking back and start moving forward without the weight of their expectations and demands. The next day, I mailed the letter. I didn't expect them to understand. I didn't expect an apology or even a reply. This was for me, a final way to draw a line and protect myself from any more hurt. And as hard as it was, I felt lighter, knowing that I'd done what I needed to do. In the weeks that followed, my family tried every way possible to get back in touch. My dad sent emails, messages popped up from my mom on every social media platform, and even distant relatives started reaching out. They were all saying the same thing, that I was being stubborn, that I needed to make things right with Tasha for the sake of the family. But none of it shook me. I had said my piece, and for the first time, I felt at peace with that. Alan kept me updated on what was going on, and apparently, Tasha was still playing the victim, acting as though I was the one causing the family divide. My parents, from what I heard, were making excuses for her left and right, brushing off what she'd done as a mistake of youth or some nonsense like that. It was maddening, but I realized that it was their problem now, not mine. I threw myself into my new life, focusing on things that actually brought me joy. I got more involved in work, took on new projects, and even made a few close friends who knew nothing about my past and just saw me for who I was. For once, I was living for myself, not trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. Then, one evening, I was out with my new friends when my phone buzzed. I glanced down to see an email notification from my dad. I felt a pang of guilt, but then I reminded myself of all the pain I'd gone through, all the times I'd been asked to just let it go for their convenience. I knew I couldn't go back to that. I deleted the email without reading it, feeling a weird sense of satisfaction. I was done with their guilt trips and their demands. Life kept moving forward. Every day felt a little brighter, a little easier, as I stopped looking back and focused on what I wanted. Sure, there were moments where I'd feel a twinge of sadness, a reminder of what I'd lost, but then I'd remember all that I'd gained, the freedom, the peace, the chance to be myself without any strings attached. In the end, breaking away was the hardest and best thing I'd ever done. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was a life I'd built on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like that was enough.